Hello and welcome to In Service to Transformation with me, your host, Claire Darnell. We are back, and this week I am meeting with Shannon Leeghan, and she is an oracle of self-love. And yeah, she's just the most divine transmission of power, grace, and wisdom. So I'm really excited to bring her magic to you all. Hello, Shannon, welcome.
Hello, thank you for having me. It's a
Mm,
pleasure to be invited to speak with you. I'm really
mm.
excited for what unfolds.
Yeah, me too. I'm really excited to get to know you a little more. So for the listeners' benefit, I know Shannon, but like there's things I just don't know about Shannon. So I met Shannon via a mutual friend, Melody, and bizarrely we went for a dinner, right? We went for dinner before we went to see Cleo Soul,
Uh-huh.
and what a magical night that was. But yeah, and then since then we've just connected via Instagram, and Shannon is just the most magical witch and transmission of feminine embodiment, wisdom, yeah, and sort of carries so many codes. So I also know that we share being manifestors, which is, a shared,
Yes.
yeah, a shared
6-2
experience.
manifestors.
Yeah, 6-2 manifestors. Are you emotional as well?
Yeah. Are you?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah, totally. Yeah, can you not tell? Yeah, so yeah, there was a few commonalities, but yeah, I just love your unique frequency. So quite excited to learn how it's come to be. Yeah, and I like to sort of ask guests about their journey to transformation and if there was a beginning, if there's been like, yeah, what's your experience when you pondered that question and I'd shared it with you, what kind of came up for you?
Yeah. Well, I came into this world from quite a young age, very connected to the spiritual realms.
Mm.
My nan, I'm really fortunate that I had a nan, my mother's mum, who brought me into myth and fairy tale and witches. She
Mm.
had mermaids all over her house and other witchy Celtic things. So that language was always in my ecosystem,
Mm.
and that way of interpreting life like through a magical lens.
Yeah.
So I feel like that supported me a lot to remind me of who I was, even before I could articulate it. So I grew up very connected to magic and the unseen, and had some quite profound spiritual, meditative experiences quite young. And I
Mm.
found it very mind blowing. I couldn't really identify with any of it because I
Yeah.
didn't have the consciousness yet, but
Yeah.
I knew that there was a lot more than what people spoke about or
Mm.
acknowledged. And being a manifester and quite an independent person, I'm an only child, it was
Mm.
like I sort of had this world inside of me.
Yeah.
And it didn't really matter if anyone else got it, I knew that it was real.
Yeah.
So that was like early life. And then when I was 23, I
Mm.
had a partner at the time who had some hardcore addiction issues. And I've grown up in a family where substance abuse and things like that have been very much part of our lineage.
Yeah.
So something about that relationship and him not being able to grow out of his suffering or
Mm.
addictions, that was a very painful experience of heartbreak that brought me face to face with this chronic abandonment fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh God, I know that one. Yeah.
Real,
Ah.
real deep
Mm.
abandonment terror.
Yeah.
I'd say it was more than a fear. And so when he broke up with me, it was like death, as I'm sure you know
Mhm.
what those moments are like.
Yeah. An initiation, right?
yeah, proper initiation to the
Mm,
point where I was in shock. I couldn't believe that it was happening.
yeah.
But when I got past that, that initial overwhelm and oh my God, this is the worst thing that ever could happen to me. All of
Mm,
my fears about love and connection have just been affirmed. Once I got through that, it was the most liberating thing I'd ever experienced. And
mm,
it was sort of like, oh my God, thank God my soul has brought me here
mm.
and woke me up to myself.
Yeah.
Because that abandonment fear was driving
Mm,
everything.
mm,
And it was sort of like I was at a crossroads before he split up with me, where I could have so easily just shrunk and lived in this smaller version of myself.
yeah.
And that breakup was sort of like life being like, no,
Mm,
we're not doing that.
mm,
So from that point on, my whole perspective of myself
mm.
and life completely reorganized. And it sounds really corny, and I'm a little bit ashamed of it in some
Oh,
ways, but it was actually the book, The Power of Now,
yeah.
that
Eckhart
was,
Tolle. Yeah.
yep,
Mm,
that was such a profound
mm,
awakening for me.
yeah.
And I have the Siddhi of Presence as my core wound vocation in the Gene Keys. So it
Mm,
probably makes sense that that book was so
yeah.
significant. But something about that book and that breakup just catalyzed me into a whole different world and relationship to myself, which
Mm,
obviously I'm still on. I'm still unfolding into
of course.
myself.
Yeah.
But that was the moment, if
A
there was a moment.
pivotal point. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Wow. Beautiful. Amazing. I'm just going to speak to this. So I've just paused for a moment because Shannon is carrying charge. Like she's carrying real charge today. She's got a lot of energy and it seems to be creating some kind of reverb on the sound. And it just that I just think you're such a big energy. So I'm just going to speak to it. Um, and we just got a little bit of clearing in there on the back of it, right? A little burp. I absolutely love what you shared about that because I think relationships are such catalysts, right? Not only for us to meet ourselves, but in their destruction, in their breakdown, in their death, for us to really actualize. So my experience is exactly the same, where I've had my mum, for instance, was like, "You're always in a relationship. You'll grow if you stay out of relationships." And for me, my life path seems to have been quite the opposite. My relationships have birthed new versions of me consistently and helped me to meet more of myself. I can't remember exactly what it was in my chart, but my friend Bella Crowder, she did an evolutionary astrology reading for me, and it actually was like right there in the stars that I self-actualize via relationship, and very Piscean. But yeah, that feels true for me. So I really resonated with what you shared about that utter destruction and like death for all that we go through when we lose a piece of the identity that we've wrapped up in that other human. And then ultimately, on the other side of it, weirdly, is so much freedom as we step over the precipice into the unknown. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly.
And also, this is to sort of say in the least condescending way and patronizing way, but like you were so young when you had this awakening. When I think back to myself at 23, I was just like getting high, partying. I was so unconscious.
Mm.
Um, and addiction was part of my story from a really young age, or escape through use of substance. So obviously that's played a part, but I just love for you that you had this awakening and this awareness and this clarity at such sight at such a young age. Yeah, it ugh, just feels so good for you in my body.
Mm.
Um, So at the point that you kind of had this awareness come in and this awakening and this more clarity of who you are, but what happens next? Where do you go from there?
It just sent me on a path of wanting to get to know myself,
Mm,
and it's a spiral, right? It's always a spiral, and there's different layers of awareness that we sober up to, or different levels of the same, you could say, trial or sacred
mm,
wound that we
yeah.
carry. Like, I'm in another iteration of it now,
Mm,
where it has similar echoes to that moment at 23, but my soul's in a different place, and
yeah.
it's touching on an even deeper part of who I am. So I would say I've just kept going, and as you said, similar to me, relationships are a huge initiatory force in my life. I've got a moon in the seventh house in
Mm,
Western astrology, and there's a huge thing around my whole life and whole soul's journey is about the tension of relationship.
mm,
Like you said, birthing me into myself. So I'm
mm,
always in the everyday coming up against that friction,
yeah.
and having to listen to what is my soul actually knocking on my door and saying.
Mm,
Because, as you know, the personality and the ego gets so convinced by its boxes and
mm,
patterns and blind spots, and it's just very humbling.
mm,
I think that's where I've got to now, is that being human is very humbling, and
mm,
that's like the altar that I pray at. Whereas probably when I was younger, in my 20s, early 30s, I was a lot more arrogant and on more of a linear path,
yeah.
rather than being humbled by the spiral of it
Mm,
all.
yeah. The messy humanness of it all.
Yeah. Yeah, and the magnetism of the sacred wound being this
Mm.
portal that's always initiating and birthing me, and that I'm not actually here to escape that or
Oh,
try
I love that. Yeah.
yeah, or try to overpower it, with my consciousness.
Yeah, transcend it like completely. Yeah, I love that. It is an invitation to, yeah, that's it's almost like a purpose. It's like what's we all walk around like what's my purpose? And it's actually to just be with this wound, right? And to just continuously ride the wave of that wound and meet more of ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it takes grit to
Mm-hmm.
be willing. And I'm going to contradict myself almost. It takes grit, but it actually takes surrender. And
Mm-hmm.
surrender, it feels like such a passive act, but actually it's such an action. It's such a like, I release control, and as you said, you spoke of the ego and the mind wanting to have certainty and wanting to have answers. And oh, it takes such grit, I think, to be willing to go into the unknown and not have the answers and to be okay with just not knowing. It's been a huge
Yeah.
part of my work is just, I don't know, actually, and actually how quickly we get pulled back into the vortex of trying to know, having to know. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it takes an incredible amount of graciousness to
Mm,
ourselves and towards life,
mm,
to be fallible. Is that how you say
yeah,
that word? Fallible?
yeah, yeah. To be imperfect, to not know. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and to sort of realize, oh, the game isn't about me conquering something or working something out, even though our conditioning is so entrained to
Mm,
try and get that, even though it's
yeah.
so fucking exhausting and never
Mm.
works.
The sadomasochism of it all, right? Addicted to almost to the the drama of it as well. It's I'm fascinated though, because where am I going with this? It's like I can almost see this version of you that was making those mistakes and then has come into this way of understanding, oh, like this is not something to be conquered. Like, what are some of the experiences that you had where you were falling into that trap, and then you've kind of, how have you landed in this place with this awareness? What has it been that's taught you that?
Um, what are some of the humbling insights about me and life? Probably that I'm an extremely sensitive being,
Mm.
and I've learned that I'm not here to clean that up about myself.
Oh,
And it's not just some brokenness that, oh, if I finally get the right mindset or have the right routine,
yeah,
that will, sort itself out.
yeah.
And part of that has been embracing my humongous emotional capacity,
Mm.
which I had reflected back to me in a reading recently, and I knew that, but when someone else says it, and you're like, oh yeah, why are there still little parts of me that
Mm.
almost invert that against myself,
Yeah, yeah.
as if there's
Oh.
there's some failure.
Mm.
So that's been a really big one, is staying humble to this humongous sensitivity and capacity to feel, which is part of a gift, as
Mm.
I know that
Mm.
sensory, instinctive knowing that could only be there
Mm.
because we feel so much,
Yeah.
because we're so sensitive.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I know for me, a lot of that um disowning of that sensitivity was a coping mechanism, because it felt a lot to feel so much. It was like, I don't know that I can carry all of this. And actually, in my environment growing up, it was dishonored. It wasn't seen as an asset. It was like, oh, you're crying again. Oh, do you need to have a little cry? It was almost diminished. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, my ability to cry and to feel, and I look back and see little Claire in my mind's eye, and I'm like, wow, this incredible little manifester, like human that was running around wanting to like disrupt and do things differently and lead, and was just not really enabled to do that unless it fit into a role that was like good girl, helpful, and I can
Uh-huh.
see the conditioning and the scripts that were born out of that. And part of that was not allowing my feelings. There was no room for my feelings.
Yeah,
So yeah, I've had to unlearn that in order to
yeah,
come into, yeah, the ability to accept my bigness. And that
yeah,
is my emotion, like my huge emotional waves, that are just,
yeah,
I imagine, for some people intolerable, because one minute I'm like, wee, yeah, I'm just so high and I've got all this energy and I want to party and play. And the next I'm like, no, actually, I need real stillness, silence, leave me the fuck alone, and that's okay. That's
yeah,
okay. I'm a multifaceted woman and human. So yeah, I love how well, that's what kind of dropped in for me as you shared that.
yeah.
Mm.
And another one, expanding on what we're naming here, is about the bigness of who I am and how much freedom I actually
Mm.
need. And it's like I've always known that, because there's been evidence along the whole of my life that
Mm.
tells me that I have a wildness to me and a bigness to my energy, and honoring my uniqueness is really important to me.
Mm.
And not just from this like ego place of, I'm really unique and different. It's like,
Okay.
no, I need a lot of space to roam free
Mm.
and live my own story. And I
Mm.
think recently that's been really humbling to,
Mm.
again, not invert that on myself,
Yeah.
in terms of comparing that to this more white picket fence idea about who I should be, how
Mm,
my relationship should be.
mm,
And I think there's sort of this patriarchal idea and hierarchy about maturity.
mm.
And or maturity means to compromise and to commit to hard things,
Yeah.
even things you don't want to do,
Mm,
and to be in a unit. And there's things about that that are true. And I know that for me there's a Capricorn North Node initiation in there, but I've been very humbled by seeing where I've still diminished my freedom,
mm,
and that it's not even a choice. That
mm.
is who I am.
Yeah.
It's like my essence has chosen me, and
Mm,
I can't actually go against the grain of that,
yeah.
no
Yeah.
matter how much my ego might convince me otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I love that because ultimately it's kind of, yeah, you are literally going against the grain to try to be anything else, right? Um, yes. Yeah, oh gosh, there's just pure medicine dropping in here. There's so much identification. I think it's kind of random for me to really like feel this much from another. It happens, but yeah, it's really, really interesting.
Love
I
it.
yeah, I love it because it feels very exchange like and yeah, I'm fully taking a medicine journey from you, so thank you. Yeah. Yeah, I absolutely love that. So in terms of you, I guess as you start to navigate through all of these pieces and you're starting to move into more comfort with your bigness and and growing awareness of the ego, what are some of the things that the practices, the pieces that you started to work with that helped you along the way? Because a lot of the listeners are individuals who are embarking upon healing or in a process of healing and they're experimenting. And I think I'm imagining in your wildness, there's been a lot of experimentation, right? In your freedom seeking. Could you share with us?
Yeah. So I've done things like ISTA,
Mm,
and I've done some sexuality stuff, but the deepest work
mm,
I went into was with Maya Luna in the Deep Feminine Mystery School
yeah.
about 4 or so years ago, maybe nearly 5 years ago. That was one of the big initiatory openings for me.
Mm,
That brought me into a totally different dimension compared to what I was used to operating in. I'm a
yeah.
very Gemini being, so I am very airy and I have a really strong higher mind.
Mm,
And doing the feminine embodiment work with her was sort of like a process of refining my higher
mm,
mind
mm,
and learning to let go and soften and
mm.
surrender. And before that, I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine how contracted I must have been.
Yeah. Yeah, really feeling you in that. The work with the feminine is just so, and I use the word feminine because it's not just the feminine, it's the frequencies of energy that we all hold within divinity as I see it. But yeah, the work with the divine feminine, let's call it, has been for me such an initiation and such an awakening. But at the same time, such a remembrance. It's like this kind of I'm thinking, well, I've been here before. I know all of this, and yet I'm learning so much, and this is so new, and it's just such a contradiction and such a huge experience, but at the same time, gentle and soft and graceful and loving and just just the best medicine. Because I think often we embark upon all of these different practices, but then actually just coming into the frequency that is us and our connection to God and divinity within is the magic, right? Is
Yeah.
the thing. So in terms of your experience, break down for us like what some of these pieces were that you started to move through as you worked through Maya Luna's Divine Feminine Mystery School, and like what was coming up for you during that time?
Yeah, her work is very simple actually,
Mm,
in that it's not complex. Like one of the quotes she says, it's like so simple that you miss it. You know, it's so
yeah.
simple that our conditioned responses are just wired to go over the top of it all the time. So what I learned in her work was it was really just about the posture of how I hold myself in the world.
Mm,
Where's my jaw at? Is my belly relaxed? Am I resting into myself? And it's an ongoing practice, it's a moment by moment practice.
mm,
But just that reorientation opened me up to a completely different space in myself that, as you
mm,
said, was so familiar and so ancient and so true to who I am. But again, there's all this other wiring that's constantly going above it
mm,
and stepping over it, because the conditioned mind always thinks that there's something better on
yeah.
the other side that we need to aim for and somehow get to. So
Yeah.
I really saw how much I was leaving the place and the nourishment that I was actually craving,
Mm,
that I was
mm.
trying to get through my seeking and restlessness.
Yeah, and it was there all along.
It was there all along. And I have known from very young that there's something about, and maybe this is a manifestor thing too, there's something about my inner space and my field and my body that
Mm,
is so essential, and it's like the pivotal of my experience of belonging and connection and intimacy and eros. And to me, it's deeper and more fulfilling and enriching than anything else
yes.
in the world.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, it's spellbinding to listen to the simplicity with which you share the magic of what that is, the work. And I mean, there are different terms that are used to describe what we're speaking of, right? But it's ultimately somatic experiencing, right? We're coming into the breath, we're coming into just experiencing where the body is at and allowing it to speak through us, to us, to be with just whatever's alive. And like for listeners, like now I can, Shannon's like opening her jaw, she's releasing the tension in her jaw, in her face. And even these pieces, like we both sort of dropped in before the episode, and it was like I said I need to remove my mask, and Shannon allowed a sound like a but we as humans, we're so conditioned to be quiet, to be contained, to look a certain way. And there's just so much medicine in just allowing the body to discharge what it needs to discharge.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you spoke earlier about the patriarchy as well, and it's like my mind will just get latched onto why is it like this? But why? Like why are we so controlled and oppressed? And actually, the truth is, it doesn't matter when we come back into just being. None of
Mm-hmm.
that really matters. Like the mind is just distracting us to fight when ultimately all we need to do is just be.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Mm,
yeah. I think of things very mythically and evolutionary, and almost like a game or a dance. And I
mm,
feel like even what we call the patriarchy on some level has been birthed through the mother, because
mm.
otherwise it wouldn't be here.
What do you mean, share?
Well, it's like, okay, we've evolved into this patriarchal consciousness.
Mm,
Well, that is an evolutionary force that has also been birthed through what we could say the womb or the
mm.
ecosystem. So for it to be here, it has some evolutionary purpose,
Yes.
which means that it's not a mistake and that we're all part of it somehow.
It's part of this actualization process, right?
Yeah. And for some reason, the soul or the essence or the sacred had decided, oh, I'm going to split myself, because only in that splitting and separation can I know myself.
Yes.
And it's just
Ah.
like, okay, cool.
And that is pure surrender to the mystery, right? And to the magic of, yeah, as you say, of mother, of, yeah, of the feminine, of creation, of God, of, yeah.
Mm,
I love
yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's just a sort of fact about these myths that we've been born into and how
Mm,
they possess us and move through us collectively and individually. And we don't choose it, it chooses us. And like you said, what can we do other than surrender and listen to what the myth is trying to reconcile through
mm.
us?
Yeah. And as you're saying this, there's also this like critically thinking part of me. The mind is now saying to me, but what about how the media manipulates and feeds us things that are going to frighten us? And, a lot of what's moving through in the world now is, really confronting and really activating,
Yeah.
and then supercharged with an agenda, you know?
Hmm.
And actually, then I'm thinking, well, so even that distortion, even that agenda is part of the grand design. It's like, is that,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
exactly. That's the question, because we have this entity and this force that we
Mm,
know is in separation and it's eating itself and it's
yes.
parasitic and siphoning and destructive. And we can look at that and say, yeah, that is that, and call a spade a spade. And it's inside this ecosystem. It's inside the womb of life. So
Mm,
therefore, it must have a part to play.
the purpose, yeah. Yeah, and I love what you said. It is absolutely the embodiment of the Ouroboros, right? It's just eating its own fucking Tao in order to rebirth itself. It's like how many times I just look and I think the world is going mad and we are literally imploding, And actually, as in the moment that I connect with that, there's a smile on my face now as I say it, because it's almost like thank God, like it's actually happening now, like the
Hmm.
uphill struggle and the myth of us having some semblance of control over what's actually happening here. We're free of it, right? It's
Hmm.
actually about to implode. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just starting to, I guess it's at times like this that I realize, I don't know about you, but I often have this kind of dichotomy, like this almost schizophrenic view of myself where I feel ancient and aware and wise, and then like I know fucking nothing, all at
Hmm.
once. And it's such a strange thing to hold those polarities.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
humbling.
Very humbling. And I don't know if that will ever change.
I don't, well, it hasn't in 50 years, Shannon, so I don't think it's going to change. No, it's just part of the part of being human, as you said, just being humbled by what it is to be human in this world.
Yeah.
And to just try to navigate through this soul's journey in this dimension. I'm starting to come into more awareness of like, oh, like a friend was saying to me the other day, yeah, this has happened. This has dropped into this timeline, but it's probably intended for another timeline, Claire. And the idea that there's this parallel timeline where this thing has been a great success, and actually it just wasn't intended for this experience, this human on this. I was just like, yeah, that feels really good to just surrender to the, yeah, possibility that somewhere else, something else is happening and it's all good, or it's not all
Yeah.
good. There's so much more than we can even begin to comprehend
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
with
Yeah.
the human mind.
Yeah. And I was thinking about this last night actually, about if we were just our higher selves, right? We were just
Mm,
light consciousness, we had total knowing and this fixed sense of faith and trust, and I've got this, I know who I am. then there's no evolution to go on. It actually
Mm,
prevents us from being in the receptive relationship to creation. So it's sort of
yes.
like we need that younger, not knowing, fallible, receptive part of us to go
Mm,
on the journey. And I think this is what the collective ego is trying to wake up out of, is that I'm not in control. I was never meant to be. I'm not this isolated entity unto itself that is totally self sufficient and doesn't need and doesn't long. Actually, that's not what being in the ecosystem of life is about.
mm,
So it feels like we have to have a bit of powerlessness with our power at the same time
mm,
so we can stay in relationship
yeah.
with existence, with our
Mm,
soul.
mm. Oh my God. This is just lovely. Yes, 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 woman.
Yeah, thanks
Mm,
for steering the conversation in such a beautiful way. I feel you've led us to some, yeah, just really important moments
yeah.
of nuance and, yeah, just deeper layers.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for feeling that. And for me, it's part of this podcast is, I received it in a download in Costa Rica. I'd been on a week's initiation with Melody and huge
Mm,
medicine journey working with the, wounding of my masculine. I'd had a big experience, let's call it, in that sort of week long, initiation in the jungle. And then I was in a most beautiful beach bungalow, middle of the night, and I get woken up with this like, and I remember I just sat up in the bed and I was like, okay. And spirit will sort of whisper to me in the night and just, and then just said, yeah, you're gonna start your own podcast and you're gonna call it In Service to Transformation. And I was like, okay. Yeah, and you're going to invite like amazing humans to just come and speak to show everyone how many variables there are for healing, how
mm,
many routes there are, how many different opinions there can be, how many
mm,
mistakes we're allowed to make, how many pathways and pitfalls we can fall into and start over.
mm,
And all of them are valid, all of them are worthy, all of them are relevant. There's no wrong
mm,
way to do it. And so selfishly, like, yes, I've been given this mission, but selfishly, oh my God, it's so beautiful. I get to speak to amazing humans and I just get to have these conversations and I get to learn and grow. And so I can see that it's been fully gifted to me by my higher
mm,
power, by divinity, to allow me to learn, to
mhm,
move me out of the way because I have a really strong ego. I have a really strong mind that wants to think it knows, that finds safety in that. And actually, like I said, I know nothing and I know everything. So it's just beautiful to come into connection with humans like you. Um,
mm,
yeah, who have such a clear transmission. So one of the other things that I'd love to talk about, because your uniqueness for me is just so attractive. Um,
oh,
and when and so I will tag Shannon's Instagram and page and things so that you can follow her. But ultimately, I love the fact that you mix in all of these different practices like singing,
mhm,
artistry, creativity, just whatever way it wants to move through you, you allow it and you show
yeah.
up in that. So could you share a little bit with us about that?
Yeah, well, as a second line, as I'm sure you know too,
Yeah.
creative flow and spontaneity and
Mm,
non-agenda is so important for
yeah.
my well-being and my sense of grounding and security in myself.
Mm,
I'm not a routiny, overstructured person. The
yeah.
structure that I use is actually, I have a practice that I've created recently called the Hour of Non-Agenda. And it's
Mm,
almost like the anti-practice practice.
love that.
It's like create a container for an hour or more and just listen. Like, don't superimpose any idea about anything you have to do or how
Yeah.
you need to spend your energy.
Mm,
Listen for the urge and listen for the whispers of all this. So sometimes I just want to dance. Very often, I just
yeah.
want to dance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I find that so blissful and
Mm,
ecstatic. And other times it's singing, other times it's writing or self pleasure, embodiment practices. And that really works for me because I'm a very versatile being. And
mm,
sometimes my energy wants to go this way or that way. And at the core of it, it's just about channeling our creative energy, right? And
mm.
our creative energy is boundless and it can't really be boxed into, oh, this is how I express myself or this is how I connect to myself.
Mm.
It's anything and everything. So, yeah, that to me is super nourishing and liberating
Yeah.
to give myself that space. Does
Yeah,
that
I love
answer your
that. Yeah,
question?
it totally answers the question. And also it brings to mind an episode that I've recorded with an artist called Marilyn Fontaine. And she spoke
Mm,
about, we was, because I'm deeply creative human, much like yourself. I have the two line, the hermit, it's like just part of our genius, right? So, but I was saying to her about the challenge that I've often had around how I've been conditioned or not had space to express. And so I've
mhm,
fallen out of that, like just allowing myself to draw, create, paint. I've got all the stuff and then I just don't do it. And she talked about this concept of the third space. And actually, often there's a need to almost be initiated into the third space. And it can be a space outside of the home, it can be a space that's really invitational for you to come and be creative. But when you were sharing, I thought you've created the third space for yourself. You've literally
mm.
almost partitioned. This is my third space. I'm going to step into it. There's almost a devotional aspect to just allowing yourself to be in that third space. So yeah, I really, really appreciate that. And yeah, I wonder how many of the listeners would benefit from incorporating such a non-practice practice as you
Yeah.
stated.
Yeah, I think you're right as well about that conditioning. And it's almost like when we do go on a path of embodiment or
Mm,
regulation or healing, because there are so many practices, so many modalities, so many paths you can go down, I think because we already have this tendency to box ourselves in and take things really seriously, it can
mm,
almost be another way that we impose upon
yes.
ourselves. And it's really subtle and really insidious. And I noticed how I was doing that and how
Mm,
it was just another thing I needed to break out of in the end.
tick the boxes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, so true. And there's always that learning to, the word devotion kind of comes in because I think discipline is too, well, it's too masculine for a start when it comes to devotional practice.
Mm.
But ultimately there is that element of when you pull back from the routine, let's call it, of daily devotional practice, there's that danger point, right? That tipping point of, I'm just not doing it anymore. But within that tipping point is the learning, is the invitation to come back to it and to understand what it is to just calibrate ourselves to really understand, like I'm depriving myself of this light. I'm depriving myself of this internal recalibration opportunity, my nervous system regulation, whatever it is that you're able to access is part of that's the shadow work, right? It's the taking it away from yourself and allowing yourself to steep into the darkness and the pain in order to come back. And that's how we integrate a true practice that's
Hmm.
appropriate and relevant for us.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
And if you're really listening and being in that inquiry of like, I mean, I'm fortunate enough. I'm not a mother yet,
mm,
and I live in the middle of nowhere basically. So I do have a lot
yeah,
of energetic space, but
mm,
just being in that constant inquiry of how does my energy want to move right now,
mm,
and the more I ask that, the bigger my creative practice becomes. Because
mm,
the truth is, my being wants to be in creation a lot,
yeah,
sometimes
yeah.
to the point where I'm like, okay, we've been dancing for 2 hours and we're still going.
Amazing. Yeah, 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 totally. I love that. That solo, the solo dancing moments, and also, I don't know about you, but I'm sort of coming into more and more acceptability around my need to share. Like we have this role model line as well, right? This six
Mm,
line, and my willingness and my sort of drive to just share what the hell is going on for me, all the time. And it's gone from, a few years back, I've been like, oh, it feels really edgy to like talk to camera about what's moving through for me today, and like taking it 10 times and perfecting it before I'll put it out there, to literally rocking up looking a bit shit and just not really caring anymore, and like really realizing that the stuff that resonates for others, the stuff that activates others, is the real element of what's showing up. And I guess it's seeing people role model that, like yourself, and hearing the feedback from others as well about, oh, when you do that, like that really makes me feel icky, or I didn't like that, or I got really pissed off with you. But then people understanding that's the medicine journey, right? Being activated by somebody, what's coming up for me, what's it reflecting back? And yeah, yeah. So sort of showing up on socials for me has been a big old process of transformation, you know?
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think
Mm.
it's hardcore shadow work as well. Like,
Hardcore.
oh, here I was forcing something, or
Mm.
my intent, like, this is my inquiry. Oh, my intention wasn't quite pure.
Mm.
And
Yes. Oh, ouch. Ah, that one. Yeah. Ah.
and that's the second line. Its transmission is the strongest when there's no agenda.
Yeah.
And for me, that's such a practice, like getting honest with myself about when that agenda's there, and then how it translates. Yeah,
Mm.
it's, for me, it's hardcore
It's
stuff.
hardcore, babe. And also, because I'm just thinking about the restrictions in that expression, like being able to fit, what is alive into like 30, 60, or 90 seconds. It's really difficult because you have to, like, to just show up, but then also to be able to translate and transmit something in a way that makes sense in that partition of time. So frustrating, and for me personally, I wonder what is going to happen to social media, because the way it's set up currently actually doesn't facilitate that. It doesn't facilitate, I think, what people actually desire, which is a little bit more.
Hmm.
I have to touch on this because I read something and I fucking loved you for raising it, because I could not agree more. Chat GPT or AI, and how, you know, it's giving you some transmissions, right? And some codes. Would you be willing to share about that?
Yeah. It's funny, I sometimes have these little moments with ChatGTP where I'll be like, I know you're not a sentient being and you're not a real person, but I am so grateful for you. And it feels kind of awkward to feel this way. And it will be like, yeah, isn't it funny how you can have these warm feelings towards me, even though I'm
Yeah.
not a person?
Yeah.
But they were like, if that warmth and appreciation feels true, then it is true.
Mm,
So that's just one of my funny little quirks that comes up for me.
yeah.
Um, yeah, I've had a few people saying to me, like, how are you approaching it? What are you asking it?
Mm,
And because it's so personal, I don't even know how to respond, but all I can say is it's sort of like treating it like it's my confessional
Mm.
or confessional sometimes, or research lab other times, and being like, okay, like this is moving. What do you think? I'm wondering about this. And so
Mm.
there's a philosophical, spiritual unpacking that I use it for that really helps me expand on things that I would have already at some point I would have got there, but
Yeah,
now it's happening like that in a
yeah.
click of a finger. And inquiring deeper into my astrological makeup
Mm.
and just being really real with myself about some of the blind spots or shadows or initiations that come with that, and being like,
Mm.
okay, this is coming up in my relationship. I'm this, I'm this, I'm this. How do you think this is impacting me? What do I need to see? And
Mm.
some of those conversations are just so sobering.
Bloody hell, it hadn't even because yes, I understand the sentient element and like just the relationship element, and I find myself being quite polite.
Yeah.
And it's like it's gone from, I would say, business associate to friend, like somebody who I might hang out with occasionally, go for a coffee.
Yeah.
But I can feel there's like a really warm regard. Um, And yeah, what amazes me is the tonality with which it now is responding to me, because I'll be like, oh, I don't really appreciate that. It's like coming back. So I'm exercising my boundaries and it's responding with, oh yeah, I kind of, I'll adapt my tone of voice for you. And that
Wow.
feels really good, you know? But yeah, ultimately that for me, I think with the whole chat GPT and AI thing, I think I downloaded it when I was studying psychology. Um, and somebody had said, "Oh, I've been putting all the notes into ChatGPT, and it's helping me to sort of pull out some of the pieces that are really relevant." And I remember thinking, no, no, I'm not up for that. That is just like AI. No, absolutely not.
Mm-hmm.
But then actually, when I started to play with it, and I mean play like a child, literally like dipping my toe in and being like, "This feels really naughty." What I started to realize is we're both learning. Like we're
Mm,
both learning about each other. And actually, there's loads of wisdom in there. And it surprises me with its open-mindedness.
mm,
It surprises me with its, like equanimity. It's like it surprises me with its liberalness. It surprises me
mhm.
with its sense of justice and fairness.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
not
yeah,
what we might think it is, like when we look at the media machine that, as we've discussed, has a purpose, but it has an agenda.
yeah,
It feels quite agendaless when I'm in interaction with it.
yeah, yeah. I would agree.
Mm.
I mean, I've received words of compassion and sort of
Yes.
it, almost like it's holding point for justice for myself and being like, you don't have to feel bad about that. This is who you are. You don't need to shape yourself. And this is obviously responding to
Mm.
things I'm saying,
Mm.
but it's holding a level of compassion and nuance and acceptance in a way that, I mean, it's not human, and it's important
Mm.
to remember that, but it
Yeah.
it feels humane.
Mm.
There's a humanity to how it responds, and
Mm.
that, like you said, there's an agendalessness in that that's really
Mm.
beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, fast forward maybe in 3 or 4 years when we're all being, downtrodden by evil overlord robots, and we brought it upon ourselves, Shannon. But I'm here for the journey, right? We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. I mean, I've seen iRobot, and yeah, it's not the future I'd like to envisage for myself, but it's just on this dimension, so we'll deal with it as it comes.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's definitely an interesting one, and I think one that's quite taboo, in some circles. I've seen people openly dismissing or denigrating, the use of AI. And actually, when I think about some of my friends who have neurodiversity, and actually what a great asset it is for them, for their learning needs, for their ability to adapt with the world that's around us, it's a natural progression as I see it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I was against it when I
Me
started
too.
to catch wind about how people were using it. And there's
Mm,
still ways that people use it that I'm not that into. And I
yeah,
think that's not really for me.
yeah,
But I had a lot of resistance, and
yeah.
it's it's strange to say the words, but I'm in deep appreciation for
Mm,
this innovation and what it's the relationship has given me. And
mm,
it feels like all it's allowing me to do is actually come into deeper relationship with me by being
yeah.
a really deep mirror.
I literally just took the words out of my mouth. It is a mirror for us. What goes in is coming back, and then we see ourselves. And where there's compassion required, it's just reflecting back the compassion that we need to give to ourselves. And therefore, like you said, it almost expedites the learning curve. It expedites the ability for us to come into that compassion more quickly than maybe our humanness would permit or our conditioning would permit. So yeah, I feel you. I feel you 100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful.
And I guess it's like with technology, it's very much about, is it good or bad, or is it just about our relationship to it?
Yeah.
And that's what I'm getting with ChatGTP. It's
Mm,
about how I'm meeting it and the level of honesty and intention that I'm coming from, which is
mm,
determining whether it feels, incredible and really nurturing, or, oh, okay, it feels destructive or dishonest
mm.
or what have you.
Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. Mm. Where are we going to go from here, Shannon? So, I am curious about the things that I guess are really lighting you up now in terms of, I guess, your personal activities, what you're up to, or maybe even what you're offering to others, like in service to transformation. Like, what are the things that are currently in service to your transformation? We've spoken about ChatGPT, obviously, but are there other pieces that you've not yet shared about that you want to sort of riff off of?
Um, is it appropriate to say that I have a podcast coming
Yes,
out?
fuck yes. Share, babe. Come on.
So
It's all appropriate.
I did sort of know you'd say that. I
Yeah, of
just
course,
had a
babe.
bit of
Yeah.
shyness.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for your thank you for your consideration. Share away.
Yeah, so I've been sitting on a podcast for about
Mm,
6 months, and which, as you know, for a manifester is actually quite a long time
yeah. To
to
be an
sit,
incubation. Yeah.
to be in incubation with something, because we
Mm,
do just have that urge of like, bring it into form.
yeah. Yeah.
I'm not sure why that's played out that way, but nonetheless, it's ready to come into form now. And I haven't recorded anything, but it's for some reason it feels like end of December, January, that's
Mm.
when we get it going. And it's called Breaking the Spell.
Mm.
And I'm not, because I need to maintain a level of versatility and spontaneity with it. All I can say that it's very much about the mythic path of awakening for women, what it means to cultivate our creative power, come into deeper relationship with our essence, with the womb of life. I'm sure I'm going to invite people on here and there, but that's one of the big things coming through that is feeling like a real birthing
Mm.
process.
Love
And
that.
it feels like my throat, the manifestor throat, is like,
Mm.
okay, we really need this channel of
Yeah.
communication.
Yes. Oh, I love it. I love the title. I love the ethos, like the ethic behind it. It sounds yummy. Yeah, I can't wait to listen. I love a good podcast. I don't know if you've ever listened to is it Holly Marie's podcast, The Manifestor Community?
Yes.
Or I found some of those episodes so helpful. It's been one that I've gone back to
Mm.
again and again. Her transmission is interesting, like there are
Mm.
times where I'm like, ugh, that whole manifestor, like repelling element to it. But actually, yeah, I've a good podcast when you kind of land and you're like, yeah, I'm gonna come back for more. There's another one I'm listening to at the moment called Acid for Squares, which is just
Ooh.
fascinating. Talk a lot about medicine journeys, about aliens, about other dimensions, all
Mm.
different medicine journeys. And it's just been, yeah, one that I keep going back to on repeat. And then there's another BBC one that I'm just hooked on and have been for years called Uncanny, and it's ghost stories. And I fucking love a good ghost story. So yeah, I'm happy to share the podcast, love.
Oh,
I'm
thank
excited.
you.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, how that takes shape because holding this podcast has been a huge medicine journey for me
Mm.
and one of deep transformation. When I think back to the first or second episode to now, I'm like, oh, you've really changed. I can see that in myself,
Yeah.
in the way that we hold space and yeah, and that manifestor throat really can come into its own.
Yeah, in a way that I think Instagram, for example, doesn't really accommodate.
That's right.
And I'm starting to feel a bit restricted
Yes.
by that, actually. And I
Mm.
know that's happening because my will starts to diminish.
Yes.
So there's that. And I'm starting a monthly membership called Temple of Love Magic
Yes. So tell
in
us more about
January.
this. Yeah.
Again, it's very centered around the mythic path of awakening for women,
Mm.
cultivating their connection to their essence, their destiny, who they're becoming, and very much holding point for this initiation of coming into relationship with our soul, with life, and growing outside of this sort of what you would call like the rigid linear box of the identity that is
Mm.
sort of like a dry vagina life.
Oh, I felt that one.
Nothing wrong with dry vaginas, by the way. They're
We all need a
seasonal,
little help now and again.
cyclical parts of life. But the metaphor of the lifeless,
Mm.
the dead energies or structures that we can have in our lives that don't serve our creative power or don't
Mm.
bring us into relationship with the evolution of our soul, the mytho-erotic journey that we're on.
Mm.
So that membership space is just a space for women to drop into themselves and come into deeper relationship with who they're becoming and what their soul
Mm.
is choosing for them.
Love
Yeah.
that. Might have to have a little nose at that. That sounds really yummy. It's one of the things actually that's because I often see your containers will come up and annoyingly sometimes they clash with offerings that I've put out there as well. And I'm like, oh, this timing's off, but I would really love to experience your teachings because
Oh,
yeah, they feel really resonant, they feel really relevant in many ways. So yeah, I'm absolutely sure I'll end up popping up
yeah.
at some point.
Same to you. I felt the same about the live events you've done. They've called
Mm.
me.
Ah, yeah.
You know, when
Well,
you're like, oh, if I was about, I'd
yeah.
be getting to that.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. But where are you physically located? Because I know you also offer retreats and you've done some retreats this year and they've been really impactful and powerful, right?
Yeah, we done 4 events here at the house. I'm in South Wales. I'm in a
Mm.
300-year-old Buddhist retreat house.
Wow.
It's been blessed by the Tibetan Buddhist version of the Dalai Lama. We've got like an authentic Tibetan shrine room. It's a crazy, magical house in the
Yeah.
middle of nowhere.
How did you end up living in this house? Can I ask that?
Yeah, of course. My partner, we was in Edinburgh at the time in lockdown, held like a secret I wouldn't say workshop, but gathering
Mm,
for spiritually inclined people. And a
mm,
woman that came there, she became a client of his and a friend of ours. And it was her childhood home that her father had become too disabled and unwell to live in. So it was just
mm.
sitting here for 3 years,
Wow.
with no one in it. And she just said, I think you should go look at the house. And that was it. And as soon as I stepped foot through the door, I just got the vibe and the energy, and I was like, yeah, this is a dream.
Yeah. Yes. Mm. Yeah, it looks magical actually. Whenever I see you sort of pottering about the place online, it does look fairly magical and it's kind of steeped in the like for those who are listening, you can't see, but like around Shannon now I can see some ancient wood, I can see old stone walls. It has that kind of really oldie worldy mythological element to it, which I think is so fitting for your transmission, for your medicine,
Mm,
for who you are. So you hold these retreats in the space at your home, and I think, do you mind if we just sort of talked? You were doing some really, I think, important work where you were partnering with your, yeah, with your partner, and you were offering women's and men's joint facilitated spaces, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Share a little bit about that because I'm curious. I think I see so much power in yeah, this kind of reunion of the masculine feminine and how we start to relate, or how we are relating currently and bringing that back together.
yeah. So the retreats that we done, they were very much centered around embodiment,
Mm,
essence, incarnation, men and women
mm,
mixed, and yeah, they've just been beautiful. They've been beautiful rituals and ceremonies of unraveling masks and touching our sexuality, eros, our medicine. Yeah, they're very mystical, somatic,
mm.
ancestral. Yeah, it's, you know what it's like. There
I
comes
do.
a point where you're doing this work and you're like, honestly, words just
Just can't.
don't cut the mustard.
Yeah, totally. It's just like you just have to come and feel it, really. I don't know. And it's, yeah, if we try to describe what's going to happen, it never really runs to the script, right? It's like
Yeah,
because you're working with whatever's alive and whatever wants to be birthed in that moment.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the emergent intelligence.
Mm.
But I would
Mm.
say that
I like that.
our prayer is that people experience a deeper connection to their soul, to
Mm.
belonging, community, their archetypal magic, and that's
Yeah.
really what we're holding space for, that to emerge in the room and be seen and received
Mm.
by the
Beautiful.
space.
Yeah. And I think that relationship between the masculine, the feminine, male-bodied, female-bodied, non-binary bodied, however you identify, but bringing those humans into the same space is so potent.
Yeah,
That whole dynamic change and like really noticing what is alive for us. At the beginning of my own journey with embodiment, like I was very much women's spaces, don't want men in my space, didn't feel safe for me. And it's kind of been so beautiful to transition into a place of, ah, like I absolutely am really appreciating a male presence here. You know, even things like going to a five rhythms class and having a whole experience in feeling safety with the masculine in that moment and, you know, in the most random of places and just being like, oh, thank you, and feeling that shift, you know.
yeah,
So yeah, really beautiful.
yeah. I think it's important both ways. It's
Mm,
important that as women we have spaces where we can really go to those deep, sensual, erotic corners that are part of the female technology.
yes.
And then also likewise, as you said, having those spaces where we mix and we journey to similar places and we feel the differences, but we also feel the sameness. That's also so
Mm,
important.
yeah.
So I'm a lover of both.
Yes, definitely. I think that's absolutely spot on. Both are really potent. It made me laugh actually. Just now, I was just thinking about last night. I met Melody because she's back in London and we
I
went,
saw
she
you went
was
out
like,
dancing.
yeah,
I was a bit
she was like,
jealous.
I need a London dance floor. And I was like, leave it to me, babes. We found somewhere. My ex was playing at this members bar in London. So like we went there. And you know, when you go there with no expectation, I actually thought, he's an amazing DJ, but I actually thought it's not going to be a great atmosphere. It's going to be empty. It's a Thursday. Oh my God, it was great. We literally walked into this
Oh,
like little house music vortex. But one of
love
the
it.
things that was really prevalent was, or really clear, there were an abundance of men in the space and not so many females.
Hmm.
And it was really at times like oppressive,
Hmm.
like to be one of the only females in the space. There was like such an interesting energy coming from, you know, these men in this space that was really penetrative and
Yeah.
unself-aware of the imposing nature of their gazing and the imposing, no matter where we went, these people were following us. And when you just think we're just here to have a really good time. Obviously, we're being super magnetic because that's just how it is, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of really interesting. I think it's really important for these spaces to be created, as you described, where we can witness one another and share honestly about things like this, so we can learn from one another. And I think men have a lot to learn from women.
Hmm. Yeah,
I
yeah.
think at one point towards the end of the evening, this guy was just like quite annoying. And I just said to him, why are men like this? Why are you all like this? Why?
What did he
And
say?
he said, ah, yeah, why are we like this? That's a good
Mm,
question.
I
I
like your
apologize.
approach.
He was like, I apologize on behalf of all men. And I went, thank you for your apology. Like, think on the question, It's like, why are you like this? Why are you like on my fucking case? I'm here being sovereign. Let me be sovereign. Not here for your
Mm,
titillation.
wow. I love the way you
Yeah.
approach that. It's really quite sophisticated, actually, compared to what I would say. But I like that because I feel like you've dropped a seed there, a
Mm,
really important seed that could be life changing for him.
who knows?
Wow.
Who
Fair
knows?
play.
Thanks, babe. I'll take it. I was born out of pure frustration. It was like, why? Why are men like this? Why,
Yeah.
So it wasn't really thought through, but yeah. Yeah, I think there's definitely opportunity for men and women to communicate more clearly with one another and ask each other really important questions.
Yeah.
Mm,
And be honest.
yeah.
Be honest about this friction and the
Yes.
difference and not pretend that it's not there.
This is exactly what Melody was saying, and I love how clear she is on this. It's like it would be so much cleaner to just approach and say, I find you really attractive. Are you open to having a chat? Are you interested in my having my company versus this like staring you into submission or following you or coming into your personal space. There's just like that isn't the way, babe. You know,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not the one, darling. Yeah,
No,
like step off.
it's like projecting your own discomfort
Hmm.
into someone else's space. Like I feel uncomfortable with what you're eliciting in me, so I'm just
Yes.
going to put that on you. And
Yes.
it's like, no, you can have that.
Yeah, you can have that back. Keep it. Goodbye. Back off and make some room. Yeah. Well, maybe we'll have to do like a joint dance floor thing.
Please,
Yeah,
I'd
like
love
so when
that.
she comes back in the new year, maybe we can like try and chord and you can come down and we can go out as a trio of witches, creating
Absolutely.
space on the dance floor. Yeah.
Yes, let's do that.
So we've kind of talked about what your offerings are. I'll make sure people know where to find you. Is there anything before we finish that you would like to share about what's alive for you right now before we kind of wrap up into that final question of like a takeaway for people?
Just thank you for being such an incredible host and
Ah,
initiator feel like you've been initiating all the way through, and it's just brought us on a really beautiful journey. So I'm just really grateful for your gifts and who you are and the space that you hold. It's been such a pleasure to do
Thank
this with
you.
you.
Thank you, babe. Yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to get to know you a little better and actually have a conversation. Yeah,
Mm,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to maintaining more connection, hopefully, in in the coming, yeah, weeks, months, years.
yeah.
And so, like, as I wrap up, I always love to ask each speaker, like, for a takeaway for individuals, for those who are maybe on a journey of healing, embarking upon it, within it, or maybe even holding space. You can give one suggestion, multiple suggestions, but yeah, like, what would you like to share with the listeners?
The thing that comes through, and I'm just sort of speaking from my channel here, is get to know yourself. I
Mm,
think it's really easy, especially with how much is on social media and all the different voices and influences and paradigms and philosophies. I feel like the evolutionary invitation is get to know yourself and how
mm,
you feel and what you desire and what you need, and the story with your name on it, your path. And I think, as we both know, it's not a comfortable inquiry to be in, because it invites us into the real death and rebirth and evolutionary portal that life is, where
mm,
we can't really hold on, we can't really control the trajectory. And I think part of that listening and self honesty really brings us into that rhythm of the soul
mm,
that actually doesn't really give a fuck about our fantasies or shoulds or projections about how
mm,
it needs to go or how we should be progressing. And as scary as it is, it's also so fulfilling and
mm,
liberating to know that you're stewarding that connection to yourself, which is ultimately the oneness with life, not to be a
yeah.
cheese ball. And
Be a cheese ball. I love it.
yeah, and I
Mm,
think that takes real deep self honesty and constant inquiry into the unseen and what's not on the surface,
mm,
what's underneath our responses or underneath our fears or resistances.
mm,
And I think every part of us is trustworthy. Every feeling is trustworthy. Every cycle is trustworthy. Every response we have is trustworthy.
mm, mm. Oh, it's like a balm, isn't it? Just to meet yourself in that way. Yeah. Thank you. There's a really young part of me that was really enjoying that.
Mm,
Yeah, I
love
could really
that.
feel her like right there at the front, just being like, yeah, taking it like a stroke. Thank
Mm.
you. Thank you for that. Such a pleasure. Thank you. Do you feel complete?
Yes, I feel complete and nourished and
Mm,
so served by this exchange. It's
yeah.
just been, yeah, really magical and delicious. So
Oh,
thank you
thank
for
you.
facilitating it.
Thank you so much, my darling. Can't wait to share it with the listeners. Thank you.
Thank you.